Okay, well that brings us to meridians and talking about meridians. And as I understand meridians, and again, I'm not as knowledgeable, nearly as knowledgeable as you are, but I understand meridians as energy channels that run through our physical body. Could you maybe touch on that a little bit for people who have no idea what meridians are and how they're useful for healing?
Yeah, I think that's a really good description of them.
Mm-hmm.
They are kind of like a skeleton in a way, um, in that they sort of form like a scaffolding that the body then is built off of, I guess you could say. And so they are the pathways for life really to flow through the body. And there's certain meridians called the extraordinary meridians that form while we're in utero.
Mm-hmm.
And those are like the very primordial meridians, basically, like they're pre-organ, kind of individuation of tissues and cells and all that. They're just a real basic, like, beginning of life.
Mm-hmm.
And then the organs, the kind of the regular meridians, there's 12 of them,
Mm-hmm.
and they connect with the organs. That each of them has a relationship with an organ. So they are also sort of windows into the health of the organ as well, because they're more external to the organ,
Mm-hmm.
and a little bit easier to kind of contact and quantify or measure how they're doing.
These energy pathways are unseen, correct? They're not something we necessarily see with our eyes, at least three-dimensionally.
Yeah. Although you can relate to them a little more closely than one may think. You can palpate them and feel blockages in them or healthy flow in them. You can see them sometimes. Certain meridians, based on what organs they're related to, will display certain colors. More likely to have certain colors, or when you press on them, certain qualities. Like for instance, the kidney meridian runs kind of this area here, and there's a lot of like bone in that area. It's kind of a little bit deeper in the body, which is, the kidneys are a very deep organ, and then the stomach channel runs alongside the outside of the tibia. And it's like kind of fleshy, right? And the stomach is responsible for creating the meat of the body, because it's the major digestive organ. So they do have, they're not as mysterious as
Sure.
necessarily.
Well, certainly for somebody like you who studied them, I imagine, because these meridians, this is sort of your template for acupuncture, correct? Like, hitting on certain spots, and they relate to organ systems and healing ultimately. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the points that we tend to needle are along the meridians. And people practice different ways, and so some people will completely disregard the points at all and really just go on like meridian therapy type work, which is just palpating the meridians and seeing where is it stuck, where is it not stuck. Like, who cares if there's a point there or not? We want to feel what we can and then respond to that.
And then, is the individual points, how is that therapy different than meridian therapy?
They're interrelated. The
Okay.
individual points sort of have powers that they're known for, abilities that they're known for. So,
Like, each point has a name, or some of them do, correct?
Yeah, they all have names. It's true.
Yeah. Like, I just in my personal experience, the bottom one on your foot is called, like, right in the middle of your foot. Isn't that bubbling spring? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Anyway, the names, they tend to kind of allude to the healing qualities about what these, stimulating these points can do. So I'm curious, because this I don't know anything about. What are some meridians or points, or is there, how do you even start to try to put together an acupuncture for somebody who's been dealing with trauma? I guess it maybe depends on the kind of trauma, or?
It definitely depends on the kind of trauma, yeah.
Okay.
Like for traumatic brain injury, you would probably focus on the Dumai,
Okay.
which is the channel that runs up the spine.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts kind of in the perineum, and then it emerges from the body and comes up, like hugs the tailbone, goes up the spine, and wraps around the head, and it actually enters, there's a branch that enters into the brain as well. So that channel is really connected with the brain and with the central nervous system.
Wow.
And it would depend, of course, on each person, but I can see that playing a big role in healing from traumatic brain injury.
Well, I know from personal experience, I have gotten acupuncture needles in my head before and in my neck. So I do believe that point has been stimulated for me, as other points have too. But and that's pretty much what acupuncture is for somebody who hasn't done it before. It's really, you put some needles in these certain spots, these meridians, and then you would let them just sit with them for half an hour or however long. And yeah, I mean, is there anything more to it than that I'm not missing here? Or
You know, it depends. That's one way to do it. It kind of depends on what your purpose is with the needles. So if you're trying to tonify the body, like if there's something missing, there isn't enough of chi or blood or something, then you would insert your needle slowly and deeply, like you're drawing something into the body, and then you would probably leave it there for a while. If something's stuck, like blood stagnation or chi stasis, you're going to want to be, a little bit sharper and maybe move it around and then maybe pull it out, because you're trying to sort of move and then release.
That's called tonification, is that right?
That is called reducing.
Reducing,
so
okay.
Tonifying and reducing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty technical, but
Yeah.
we don't need to know all this, but just, anyway. As far as the technique, but yeah, I mean, it is important to, if somebody who comes in, just to know that there is a system behind what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's very technical.
Exactly, yeah. And there's different point prescriptions for different types of conditions, and I use those for sure, and I also just try to be as sensitive as I can to what's happening in the body, and the person's subjective experience plays into it a big part as well. And what I feel in the pulse and in the meridian. So the point prescriptions are kind of like, one of my teachers described them as a cookbook of that was produced by people who've been practicing this medicine for a really, really long time, and noticed like these particular combinations of points work really well for this. So it's something that's a tool, but it's not something you would want to rely on completely, because the heart of this medicine is really being sensitive and using your body as a diagnostic tool to feel what's going on with somebody else, and then directly relating to that.
And then here we get to the heart, and I want to touch on these two systems here. We have, in Chinese medicine, the brain is understood as
the sea of marrow.
The sea of marrow, bone marrow. It's almost like it's, as I've always understood it, sort of it's like an extension of the spinal cord almost. And we have this marrow in our spinal cord, and then we get up here, and it's just, it gets expanded. And is that roughly the case in their thinking, or is that?
Those old dead sages, yeah.
Those old dead sages, what did they know, right? No, but they placed importance a lot. It seemed like they placed a lot of importance here because they called the heart
the emperor.
The emperor.
Yeah.
And maybe talk a little bit about that dynamic, the emperor and the sea of marrow.
Yeah.
Whatever your thoughts are on these two systems.
Yeah, I think it's very indicative of how Chinese medicine sees the world, that they place the self really in the heart. And the heart is kind of the driver as opposed to the brain. So intelligence and consciousness and awareness all emerge from the heart, not from the brain. But the brain is still important. The brain is sea of marrow, like you said, and that is under the domain of the kidney. Kidneys are very important in Chinese medicine. And the kidney and the heart together form an axis where they're each kind of polar opposites. You have the heart fire and the kidney water, and one is kind of the ultimate yang, the other is the ultimate yin, and the relationship between those two is what gives rise to life. So what happens in between yang and yin, how they relate to each other, how close are they connected, are they moving together, and that is sort of the measure of health in the body.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing I wanted to say about the Sea of Marrow and relationship to the Dumai, or the governing channel, which we talked about before, that goes up the spine. So that channel, as well as the bladder channel, which runs alongside each side of the spine, take the densest form of awareness, of consciousness, which is held in the kidneys, and literally squeeze it up, and because it's the opposite direction of gravity, squeeze it up the spine and up these channels. And as it moves up, it becomes more refined. And so when it arrives to the top of the body, to the top of the head, to the crown, it has become the most refined form of consciousness, which is what we experience as awareness.
So strengthening these other organ systems can help that process, that flow, if you will, of energy coming up through and into the brain. It's almost like by healing another organ system in the body, it sort of, it moves the energy, and we maybe become more spry, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And then the heart, there's also neural tissue in the heart as well, so it's no surprise to me that this is such a command center, and that there's this relationship between the Sea of Marrow and the heart. They're in communication. Is it almost like a marriage almost between the two? I don't really know how to say it.
And all the organs have a specific relationship with each other. So one of the ways to look at that is kind of like as a political system. That's one of the ways that the organs are understood as the 12 officials, which is in one of the medical texts, the Yellow Emperor's Classic on Medicine. And they talk about the heart's relationship to the lung, the heart's relationship to the kidney, and how they all relate to each other as like this functioning community, basically, that all do their part to keep the body healthy.
And they all have relevance. They all have in order for the whole system to thrive, it's sort of they all have certain needs, and they all need to be attended to, if you will. So we talked about again, like there's a very technical system to this Chinese medicine, and you talked about the cookbook. And when you think cookbook, you think, oh wow, like anybody could do it. But there's an element that you, Alexandra, bring to it. That there's the magic that you bring to this, because these are just tools, but ultimately behind it is your experience and what it is that you have to communicate through the needles. And maybe talk a little bit about what you personally bring for people who may be interested in coming to see you.
Yeah, so I practice at Heartspring Health, but my personal business is called Well Spirit. And I thought of that name, and sort of the image that goes with it is my best attempt to express exactly what you're asking, like what is my special piece, what is my special medicine? Because I believe that the spirit is crucial, the health of the spirit is crucial to not just keeping the body healthy, but also to weathering the storm of just having a body. So we honor the entire cycle in Chinese medicine: birth and gestation, birth, and then the period of life where we're kind of getting stronger and building our bodies, and then also the period of life where there's decline and then death are part of the cycle. And so what I think like the broadest term of health really encompasses all of that, because ultimately we are all going to face illness and eventually we're going to die. And so how could we have a system of health that says we're trying to stave that off? If we're embracing the whole of nature and kind of the blueprint of nature, then we have to figure out a way to maintain a broad sense of health through all of that. And so I think spirit is really the answer to that. That keeping the spirit healthy and serene helps the body be strong, but it also helps us tolerate and even learn from and grow from times when we aren't well in our bodies.
Sure. It's connecting, as if I'm hearing you right, connecting with spirit is, in the tough times maybe a way to endure, and in the beautiful times a way to fully enjoy. You know?
Right.
Cool. Well, if you wouldn't mind, we'd maybe like some of the people at home would maybe like to see some of this in action. Kara, if you would be interested in maybe
Yeah.
doing a little demo.
Absolutely.
Okay. Great. Then that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.